And I immediately sent the video to every important person in my life and said, you need to watch this because this is going to change the way that we interact with our technology and the way we work, live, and play. And I'm so excited for that.
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is a Reacts episode. Industry insiders having frank debates about the latest tech, politics, and business news. Whether you're a founder, investor, or operator in a startup, you'll gain insights into how current events connect to broader themes and trends that impact your startup, your investments, and your day-to-day operational decisions. The conversation starts now.
Hi, I'm Yaniv Bernstein.
And I'm Elli Hanson.
And I'm Chris Saad.
We have an action-packed episode today, full of the announcements of the week, primarily in AI, because that's where the action is at the moment. We had dueling announcements, first from OpenAI, revealing their new ChatGPT model, ChatGPT 4o, and then Google I/O, where they talked about their new models, integrations with Google Search. We're going to dive in and talk about the shifting competitive landscape in AI. And then we're going to have some quick hot takes about that iPad ad, and also about Microsoft and OpenAI's minuscule spend on combating election interference. Stay tuned for all of that and more. This episode of the Startup Podcast is brought to you by Vanta. You might know that sinking feeling. You're about to land a big contract when they ask about compliance. SOC 2, ISO, PCI, Essential 8. You've just snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. Not anymore. Vanta massively accelerates your compliance efforts and allows you to get those life-changing deals back on track. Don't wait until it's panic stations, though. Get started with Vanta today. They're offering 20% off their prices just for TSP listeners. Do yourself a favor. Hit pause, go to vanta.com/TSP, that's VANTA.com, to get that 20% off. So we have a new contributor to Startup Podcast Reacts. Elli Hanson is joining us for the first time. We're really excited. I met Elli at the Sunrise Festival. We immediately hit it off. And so I'm really glad, Elli, that you are joining us on the Startup Podcast. Please tell our audience just briefly a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, guys. It's lovely to be here. My background is as an industrial designer, technically trained in industrial and service design. Spent some time in ad agency land at Ogilvy in New York and cut my teeth there. And then left to be a founder. So I founded a consumer hardware technology company in the US, took my exit last year, a little bit of a sabbatical, and recently crossed the floor into venture capital, where I'm currently a principal at Side Stage Ventures in Sydney, Australia.
Fantastic, Elli. Well, welcome to the show. Let's jump right in.
All right, guys, let's dive into our first topic, which is a little bit interesting because we had the show notes drafted last night and we were all hot and heavy to talk about ChatGPT 4o. We now need to sort of talk about it in the context of Google I/O's new announcements. So we'll see how this goes. Let's talk about 4o first, and we'll do that a little bit in isolation. And then let's talk about Google's I/O and its response almost, even though it's only 24 hours. So a little bit of context, a little bit of history here. Obviously, OpenAI has been releasing model after model, and Sam's told us, and we've covered this idea that, hey, maybe they'll be releasing these models a little bit differently, a little bit more incrementally. He said there's something big is going to come before GPT-5, and true to his word, they've just announced 4o. Some of the big new demonstrated features are A, the voice interface is way slicker, way. I would say almost this thing is mostly about voice and mostly about multimodal. You can interrupt it while it's talking. There is video, live video, almost kind of doing what Google demonstrated that they wanted to do in that fake demo where it's live stream and it's interrogating what's happening on the screen. It's super fast and responds almost like conversationally. It has incredible emotion and even voice manipulation. You can ask it to talk more dramatically or more robotically. It literally sounds like Samantha from Her. I mean, it's crazy. It's laughing, it's giggling, it's flirting with you. It's creepy and weird and awesome. It has long-lived actions like, hey, act like a translator for me, and it'll kind of translate back and forth. It can sing. It has a desktop client. Now, importantly, the reasoning is similar to GPT-4. It's not any smarter, technically speaking, at reasoning. And importantly, also, it's free. They're giving it to all their free users. So this is the kind of the quick recap of what they announced. It's a lot. It's a lot. What do we all make of this? Elli, maybe you want to go first.
I thought it was so funny, just kind of one of the first things that you brought up was that you can interrupt it. I thought that was hilarious, actually. It's such a cultural thing that you can say, hey, wait. That's not what I want you to do. But I think it is actually really indicative of the way that they're thinking about this. To me, this release is almost entirely focused on interface and interaction design. They're really not focused on the intelligence of the model. They weren't talking about hallucinations or reducing hallucinations or making sure that it gets the right answers. They're not even talking about, the model continuing to build on additional data or learning or the intelligence behind the platform. They're really focused on interaction design. And I think that's pretty indicative of what we've heard Sam talking about quite a bit. As you said, he's also very focused on reasoning. And this is something that they recognize is still a horizon that they have to tackle. But this to me was a shift in the way that this release occurred, in their focus and their attention to vision, voice as a key interaction method, as you pointed out, and how they're thinking about this as a product experience as opposed to a model.
I think you nailed it. First of all, before we get into all the awesome stuff, 4.0, like, what is it with these companies? They reach a certain scale and they're like, let's just get really bad at naming things. This is like,
Right.
They're following the Google model of giving things bad names. Apparently the O stands for Omni, which doesn't help at all. So
Yeah, it's actually a catastrophically bad name. It should be like 4S, 4 plus, 4 something, but 4.0 is so bad.
I mean, I think you can look at the Google changing from Bard to Gemini, all of these names.
Yeah.
I think it's something that we've seen, and they definitely need to bring in a branding expert on this one, on naming.
Yeah.
insane. But anyway, Ellie, like, I completely agree with you that the thing that stood out for me wasn't the multimodal stuff. I mean, that's cool. But like you said, it's the interface thing. Speed, right? We've had voice interfaces before. We've had chat interfaces since ChatGPT. One of the things that's always gotten in the way of feeling like you are talking to another person is that latency, right? There's a delay in starting the response, and then there's a slow delivery of the response. And what they seem to have done with this is eliminate both those issues, right? So forget about the voice stuff, just with the chat interface, it's so much faster. That's one of the things I actually liked about Gemini, is it was faster than the old ChatGPT. That makes a huge difference. Interruptions, even in text, makes a huge difference, because what used to be annoying is it would take 20 seconds to put out an answer, and like, you're 3 seconds in, you know it's not what you're looking for. You're like, no. Okay, so it makes it a lot more naturalistic. And then that unlocks the voice interface, because then you can actually have a conversation. Like, until then, you could say that you were having a conversation, but like, if you've got a 20-second pause before you get a response, you're not really having a conversation. The latency is too high. The lag is too high. So they've eliminated that. That's the big thing for me. The flirty voices, I'm less impressed than you, Chris. I'm certainly freaked out. It's gross. But I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, it just sounds like it's trying too hard, and you can still tell it's a robot.
I think it's funny that you guys both had such a reaction to this voice. You know, obviously, I think what they were trying to show is that they actually are trying to imbue emotion into this model's verbal response now, which to me, I think was effective. And I assume that they're going to get to a place where obviously you're able to customize and select the different voice methods that you know, it doesn't have to be a Samantha from her if you don't want it to. But I think I was pretty impressed with the range of the voice. It's funny that you guys both had such a reaction to the flirtiness. I was like, oh, bubbly and playful.
Well, maybe, I think it really was the Samantha from Her thing.
It sounds like Scarlett Johansson.
Maybe it's a gender thing.
Yeah.
It felt like it was trying to manipulate our emotions.
Yeah, no, it's definitely yeah. It has a Scarlett Johansson voice, which I'm wondering why she hasn't sued them yet, and it has like a McDreamy voice from Grey's Anatomy, which the Figure One demo uses. And it has, like, you know, two very popular actors in Hollywood and whose voices are, you know, very much admired, let's call it. Yeah, I think you guys nailed it absolutely, that this is about UX, and the UX piece is about speed and multimodal. I think there's a real lesson here. I think it's actually about product, business model, and partnerships. And it's a lesson for founders, I think, and operators. So you can see how Sam and the team are thinking about this not as a pure technology problem, not as a go deeper and deeper and deeper on research and reasoning only. It's about recognizing that ChatGPT was a UX revelation, right? Because GPT had been there for a long time. It's when they turned it into ChatGPT that they had their ChatGPT moment. Mm-hmm. And that was a UX revelation. And now they're kind of adding a voice and video revelation, a UX change. And I think it will change the way people interact with it. It'll change the way it feels. And that is a product change. Obviously powered by deep tech, but it is a focus on UX. There's also a business model aspect to this, which is that it's free. And they're setting the economic value of this level of reasoning, this level of emotionality, this level of multimodality. And they're taking all the oxygen out of the room for all these other startups and even potentially for a Google or an Apple. And this is non-trivial and not accidental. The way they characterize it is, oh, well, OpenAI for us, the open part means that everybody should have access to it. And it's about, democratization of access to AI. It's also about setting the value to zero, taking the oxygen out of the room, and then later taxing the world when they become one of the primary intelligence layers of the universe. And then the other observation I made is there's a bit of interesting partnership dynamic here because Microsoft's given them like $10 billion, except all the devices on stage were Macs. And the first desktop client is Mac. And it says the Windows client coming later this year. And I just think that is an interesting thing, given who their partner is right now. And it's an interesting thing, given the rumors that we were going to cover on today's show as well, which is that Apple is flirting with the idea of adding ChatGPT to iPhone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly those types of decisions are no mistake when you pull out a MacBook onto the table and that's the one that you're working with, and that all of the Apple products that they were obviously demoing through. I have been wondering, obviously, this announcement would have, if that's not the case, it would greatly usurp the forthcoming Siri overhaul that we know we're going to be seeing at, June 10th Apple Developer Conference. And I think that it is potentially an indication of what's to come, hopefully, maybe. I think that there's a really interesting precedent for it. Obviously, Apple, we know, has partnered with and licensed with, call it, frenemies in the past with licensing Google and ensuring that Google search is the default search engine on every iOS device and every Apple device when you go and open up a new tab and search for something. We have seen these types of really broad reaching and super effective licensing partnerships in the past. So we know that Apple's willing to do that. It is a pretty interesting question of whether or not both parties are going to come to the table. It would definitely position them combining the hardware expertise that Apple has with really the new software paradigm of AI that OpenAI has created, and could be a juggernaut.
I nearly see that this whole AI thing, it's becoming very Game of Thrones, right? So it was like, Microsoft were making these moves. There was the board thing. There was the hiring all those people from, I can't even remember the name of the AI company, sort of the acquisition that wasn't an acquisition from Microsoft. And Apple are in an interesting role in this Game of Thrones, I think, which is they have the ability maybe to be a bit of a kingmaker, right? I think in their actual AI tech, never count Apple out, but they seem to be not in the same level as OpenAI or Google or Facebook or Anthropic or all of those guys. But they have that distribution power, right? And I think there were rumors not that long ago that we covered in this podcast too about Apple getting into bed with Google. So it nearly feels like it might be in their interest to be playing these other folks off against each other to maximize their leverage here. If there are rumors of Apple with Google, then Apple with ChatGPT and, goodness knows what. Google already pays Apple tens of billions of dollars each year for their search distribution partnership. And so that's a weird thing. Apple will be taking the tech from someone, but because of their brand and because of their distribution, everyone's going to be begging Apple to use their tech and will be paying Apple to use their tech.
It's not only the distribution, though. I think the other thing to consider is that Apple is sitting on troves of individual user data. Obviously, Apple is extremely committed to privacy. That's why they've said that Siri hasn't gotten better. We can argue in a different conversation about whether that's actually why Siri hasn't gotten better. But they are sitting on these users who have now been within the Apple ecosystem for decades of their lives and have decades of personal user data within an iCloud account sitting there ready to create personalized GPTs. And whether you're calling it an agent, obviously, we know that Sam Altman doesn't prefer that term. He calls it a senior employee or an operator or whatever it is. If you consider what that might look like for actualizing the potential for that personalized operator or senior employee that OpenAI wants to create, Apple is sitting on the personalized user data for each of its customers who are embedded in the Apple ecosystem. So it's not just the distribution. I think it's also the power of what their models can do combined with the personalized data for each user.
It's interesting. In some ways, Apple is very dogmatic about kind of the Apple way, their level of focus, the connector they use on the phone, whatever. But in some ways, Tim Cook is actually very pragmatic and will partner with a Google or a Microsoft or what have you and use their leverage and use their power. And so I think you're both right. Apple is in an interesting position to be a kingmaker here, to have them play off each other, to use the best tech and to have their own tech and putting this all together. So I think, OpenAI moved, Google moved twice or three times, and we're about to talk about Google I/O now. And then Apple's coming right up. So we'll see what happens.
Just before we go to Google I/O, there was just one other thing I wanted to respond to and actually ask a question. So you mentioned, Chris, that they've made ChatGPT 4.0 free. That is really interesting. And it's interesting because when they kind of launched ChatGPT 3 and then ChatGPT 4, and they put the $20 subscription on like the premium layer, they set the market terms, right? And everyone followed them. And now it sounds like they're changing them. And I'm actually not sure what happens to the people who are paying the $20 a month, which I am. Is that tier going away? What are the benefits of that?
I think there are a few extra features that you still get, perhaps access to the GPT store and other bits and pieces like that. But I do think they've cratered the value of that tier right now. And I think they kind of don't care. What probably fits into that tier next is GPT-5. That's probably what goes there next.
But I mean, I think it's the interesting question, right? Which is they are setting the terms of how you compete in this market. And if you're right, Chris, that, when you say taking the oxygen out of the room, what that normally means is we've got heaps of money and we're willing to run this at a loss for a long time to grow our market presence. And like all the big players have deep pockets. So I imagine that if ChatGPT is no longer interested in bringing in direct subscription revenue from this thing, Google will also make its top Gemini models available for free and so on. So it will be interesting to see because, like if the best ChatGPT model is available for free, I'll probably cancel my subscription. Like I don't need the other stuff. I was just doing it to get ChatGPT 4.
Absolutely. I think you're going to see a lot of people canceling the subscription. And like you said, Chris, they obviously don't care. I think that Sam has talked about, perhaps it was Mira in the announcement of what the premium features would be. It's clear that they're focused on moving the premium features to like super users and then also potentially to enterprise. I assume it's going to be focused around monetizing the API and monetizing their GPT store, the way that developers are able to build on it. And they're going to be focused on, I suppose, other pathways to monetization. Sam has been very, very focused in recent time on how to get GPT-4 available to everyone. As you said, Chris, whether or not that's a truly altruistic position or just setting the market and saying, hey, we're going to set the terms here, I think that's yet to be seen. But there is going to be a beneficial upside to the fact that GPT-4 level intelligence will be available to everyone. And we will absolutely see a cratering of that premium tier because there's no point in people paying for it right now based on the value add that they've said is there.
Let's talk a little bit about the interview with Sam because it adds a lot of color to what we've been talking about. He really said, this is not about models. This is about product. It's about a system. It's about building a comprehensive agent or senior employee that people trust, live with, and is a kind of constellation, which is my word, of features, capabilities, distribution, and so on. And so, this is when he was being asked about open source and about this kind of competitive dynamic between the models. And, this was in the All In podcast a couple of days before 4.0. And I think 4.0 demonstrates what he's saying. He's showing this is a better product. Forget Llama 3, forget Claude, Opus, forget all that stuff. This is a better product. And of course, to pivot again to Google, Google just showed their products literally last night for us, overnight for our time zone. So let's move on to topic 2, closely related to topic 1, Google I/O overnight, seemingly in response to ChatGPT and OpenAI, but really more, I'd say OpenAI was trying to front run the Google announcements. They have announced a whole bunch of AI stuff, as you'd expect. They're announcing AI search, or really AI overviews in search, a US general availability happening any second now, with the rest of the world coming soon. They talked about Project Astra, which is continuous video observation and caching. We predicted this actually, Yaniv, on a couple episodes ago, this idea that it'll be able to say like, hey, where are my glasses? And Project Astra saw the glasses, 30, 40 seconds ago in this video, and it said, oh, the glasses are next to the red apple. And so being able to cache at live video and tell you what's happened. They showed glasses, the glasses form factor. At least I've been hot and heavy on the idea of glasses being the form factor for AI. They showed incredible video generator, Gemini Live with interruptions, which caught up instantly with OpenAI's ChatGPT 4.0. They showed AI at the core of Android with Circle to Search, Gemini as your new assistant. So there we go. Yaniv, we also predicted Gemini taking over Google Assistant.
Yeah, that was an easy one.
On-device responsiveness. Yeah, I mean, these are all relatively obvious if you're paying attention. And then finally, as a really fun little joke at the end, they said, someone's going to count how many times we mentioned AI today, and they got Gemini to count the number of times they said AI, and it was 120. And then Sundar said AI again on stage, and it flipped to 121, which I thought was a cute little button at the end, getting Gemini to do that. So yeah, they really quickly caught up to a lot of what 4.0 was presenting and deeply embedded it across their entire suite. What do we make of this, guys?
Obviously, the very first thing that you mentioned, AI search and US general availability with that is going to be massive. I think everyone has been wondering, when is this going to happen? I think that there's been a period of time where people have been flipping between using ChatGPT searching or using Gemini searching, using Perplexity searching, going over to Google, comparing it to the search results you're getting in the traditional Google search, saying, is this accurate? And am I seeing everything I need to see? And I think that now we are finally seeing those come together in a really, really valuable space. I think that that's one of the most applicable and easiest ways in for also the AI curious, AI less literate, perhaps. And I think that that's a really, really valuable announcement. I think that it really also speaks to something that we discussed earlier, which is just that the right UI for the right task, understanding how these different user experiences, whether it's text-based or visual or voice, are now becoming real modalities for interaction in a way that they haven't before, which allows us to ask the question, what is the right mode for any given interaction or any given task that you're trying to do? I think Project Astra is going to put me out of a job with my partner, because up until now, I've been the one that says your glasses are on the table back there. So I thought that's pretty funny.
Going to lead to divorce all over the world. That plus your AI girlfriend, like, what else do you need?
Oh no, what are we going to do? I think that also people are going to have a ton of privacy concerns with that and going to feel very, very, very reticent to actually implement it and use it in their home. I think that that's a really interesting question. And then in terms of wearables and glasses, I think that, to me, we can get into what is the right wearable and how are you actually interacting with this thing. I think that that's a pretty interesting conversation. I personally am not of the same opinion as you, Chris, and I do not think glasses is the form factor there. And so we can get into that potentially in another discussion, but it is interesting to start to see them thinking about what the wearable form factor is.
Oh, good. Well, let's duke that out today. This will be fun because I wanted to talk about the glasses a little bit more. Yeah.
It's fascinating how much this mirrors the ChatGPT thing. And of course, this is not Google responding. Like, these things take months to prepare, especially at a place like Google. So maybe ChatGPT front runs it, or maybe this is just one of those things where in a highly competitive space and you've got smart people, you get a certain convergence as you learn from the market. But it's fascinating in both cases. What you can see is that the battleground is moving from the quality of the models. It's not that they're not improving the models and it's not important, but that's no longer the headline. It is now about distribution and related to distribution interfaces. It's like, okay, we've got these things that are incredibly capable. How do we actually get people using them and make them useful, which are sort of two related things? And that's why we have like ChatGPT making it free, right? Like, going back to that conversation, it makes no sense when you are fighting for distribution to make your most capable model paywalled. So they're not going to do that anymore, right? And Google, of course, they're putting Gemini into search, into the assistant. And you know what? Like, this was not the main reason, but I'm about to move from iPhone back to Android. And that's partly because I think, okay, that Google ecosystem is drawing me back in and it's becoming more compelling, not less, right? I want all of this Google goodness baked into my phone. And so it's like, oh, okay, we've got this very futuristic thing. And it kind of like, to me, it's hard nearly to hold these two thoughts in my head at once. Like, on the one hand, the singularity is approaching. On the other hand, this very old school game of distribution and pricing and user experience and everything old is new again, right? Like, the AI space is not different from any other space that's ever been there. And that's just what's happening here. Like, Google is now flexing its distribution power, the fact that it already has billions of people interacting with it multiple times a day, every day. It's like, okay, now let's take our pretty good AI model and put it into there in a way that is actually useful, right? Like, the first iteration of AI distribution, I've kind of dissed it already in previous episodes, is like, hey, let's just stick AI into everything. Like, I pick on Notion AI. I'm not quite sure why, because everyone did the same thing, but it's like, okay, we've got a product and then let's just add some AI in it. You can talk to the AI and the AI will unreliably answer your questions about this document, or it'll like write some crap that's not useful. And, it was one of those things where it very quickly transpired that once the novelty wears off, these are not useful tools. So I think now we're at the second generation. It's like, okay, we've got good models. We've actually had time to like take a minute, breathe, and think about, how do we create a useful interface? How do we actually make this AI more than a crazy novelty and more something that actually helps people? And I'm optimistic that we've kind of reached that point, which is exciting.
Yeah, I think we've nailed it on this show, which is this idea of moving from the model layer and competing on these benchmarks to the product and distribution layer. I think that is the story of this season, of the week. Let's say the seasons are changing every week. And the Gemini stuff is gorgeous, like just gorgeous. There is these like animations and just beautiful layouts, and it's pixel perfect. It's really delicious, and it's deeply embedded. It's across all of the suite of Google and Android. And the thing that I'm most excited about, and I've touched on this in previous episodes, is deeply embedding Gemini into Assistant and therefore making Gemini ubiquitous, throughout your home, throughout your car, throughout your mobile device, and on your, I was going to say Chromebook, but on your desktop devices and productivity apps. The other thing that, and we should debate this, Elli, but like I'm very bullish on Astra as this kind of continuous video processing combined with glasses. If we are to believe that the best AI agent or assistant has context, and context relies on video, and video relies on a heads-up camera that can see the world literally through your eyes, or at least cameras and assistants and Nest cams or whatever that can see your environment through third-party perspective, I think glasses become very, very compelling, and we should debate that. The last thing I want to just summarize quickly is I think what was interesting also was equally what's missing from the Google announcement. I did not see in the supercut that I quickly watched this morning much personality. The 4.0 announcement was filled with personality. Like that thing was laughing and giggling and flirting and talking at every response. And it was being sarcastic and, engaging and all this kind of stuff. And it's yet to be seen if that matters. As you said, Yaniv, maybe that's just cringy. And at Uber, we would look over at Lyft, and Lyft would do these cute pink mustaches, and they would fist bump you as you got into the car. And it turned out nobody gave a shit about that, and they thought that was awkward. And what they wanted was the fastest price in ETA. Best price, fastest ETA. And so is it a game of utility or is it a game of personality? And then the second thing that Google is missing, I think, that's interesting, we'll see how this plays out, is that while OpenAI is seen as in Microsoft's pocket, I think they've shown that they're not with the Apple devices and the Apple Mac first desktop app. And so while Microsoft does Microsoft things for Microsoft operating systems and Google does Google things for Google productivity apps and Google's Android, Apple obviously does their Apple thing. I wonder if OpenAI isn't the speedboat that gets to be cross-platform, ecosystem agnostic, connect all your third-party data sources, and will help you no matter which device, which ecosystem you're stuck in.
Absolutely. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall in the internal negotiations, arguing for using Apple devices on stage and the reason why. And I think that is absolutely accurate, and they want to at least give the impression that they are not in Microsoft's pocket, that they have agency and they can be cross-platform between the different majors. And I think that is absolutely at least part of their intent, if there was not another intent, as we discussed earlier, around potentially some kind of Apple partnership. I think that this question of utility versus personality is so incredibly interesting. I think that this is a form factor that is so completely different than anything we've seen before. And I think that so many people, because it is, at least as you said, the first sort of iteration that became so widely used and adopted was chat. The form factor begets personality. Everyone is asking for and wanting this thing to feel more, as you said, reducing latency, more conversational, more interactive, more human. And I think this also begets major issues, and asking the question of how are we also launching education resources to really equip a population with an understanding of how models work? All of us here on this podcast and other tech podcasts are deeply embedded in how these models work. We understand what is happening more or less in the back end when a model is going and scraping data and surfacing these results. But the broader population doesn't. And when you start imbuing personality, this is when we start to get into quite a dystopian and challenging space, particularly when it comes to kids. Having said that, I'm also definitely a tech optimist, and I believe that this new modality presents a real opportunity for solving major societal issues that we're having today around the loneliness epidemic, access to things like therapy and conversational support when people need it more ubiquitous and readily available, and removing the barriers to entry to those things. So I think that while personality is incredibly important in this interface and in this interaction, I think it also needs to be paired with education into how these models work. And I don't know if you've interacted with any of the existing sort of voice or therapy type models out there that are really interesting to me, these companion models. The guys on Hard Fork podcast did a deep dive into it last week.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And yeah, it really was amazing. But it really, what they're doing currently right now is like every increment of time, the model is reminding you, this is a model, this is not a human. And obviously that is not the right way to do this. But asking ourselves what is the right way is important. I think that there is a role for personality to play. I think this is more than just a utility.
This episode of the Startup Podcast is brought to you by Vanta. The team at Vanta are passionate about helping you secure your business by vastly cutting down on the time to get compliant with frameworks like ISO 27001, SOC 2, and Essential 8. Vanta lets you close deals, sleep better at night, and get back to building your product. Help yourself and help the podcast by going to vanta.com/TSP for an exclusive 20% off deal.
Let's talk about the glasses. What's your skepticism there, and what do you think is the right ultimate answer?
Well, so I'll just first of all reveal my bias here, which is that I'm an industrial designer by trade.
Oh, that's not fair. You have an advantage there.
I'm an industrial designer by trade. And so asking ourselves, this question of understanding which kinds of tasks are best suited for which kind of interfacing, and not trying to shoehorn something that doesn't actually fit into something else, which is what we've done so far, because really our interaction with technology thus far has been a visual interaction. We've had screens, and that's been the best way to be able to interact with our devices, which is what has resulted in this addictive glowy bricks that we all carry around and can't go to the bathroom without. And, now this moment is so pivotal and so exciting. I actually got like a little emotional seeing these different avenues, because we're finally able to ask ourselves, okay, what is the right interaction for any given task? And I think that there is a place for wearables. I would argue Whoop and the Oura Ring are both wearables that do not have screens, but they're still utilizing screens to be able to interact with them. I think the biggest problem for me is that people do not want to wear computers on their faces. They're very, very reticent to wear computers on their faces. I think we have to test and try so many different wearable form factors. So it's not that I'm against a wearable. I actually deeply agree with you that this idea of Project Astra and the context gathering is the only way we're eventually going to get to models that can reason and be that useful. Having said that, to me, it's trying and questioning what those different methodologies are. It's obvious that the only reason this hasn't been adopted is because they haven't created the Sailor Moon tiara as the wearable that everyone should be wearing around society. And that is clearly the only way to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. People don't want to wear computers on their head. And to me, the Oculus and the Vision Pro are clearly just smacking. Remember when your mum used to tell you sit back from the TV because you're going to get square eyes? It's just like, and then Apple, they literally have this new feature where there's like, you're too close to your laptop screen, sit back. And at the same breath, they announced Apple Vision Pro, which I thought was like the most ridiculous thing possible. I agree with that. No one wants to strap a computer to their face. The counter argument I have is that it is a tried and true decades and hundreds of years old reality that we do stick certain types of technology to our face. And that technology is eyeglasses.
What I'm looking for is a smart monocle.
Yeah.
Yes.
But this is literally the first wearable technology, right? Glasses.
In an analog form, sure, I'll accept that argument.
Right. And maybe you could argue the first analog wearable is clothes, because technology is anything, anything we invent that helps us do things. But I think glasses are so familiar, so well accepted, and the technology in Ray-Ban stories, or Meta glasses, I think they call them now, is so invisible, thanks to Moore's law and whatever, that you just be able to continue to cram more and more and more in there. I think buying a pair of glasses that don't have a processor in them will become kind of ridiculous. I just saw an interview with Warby Parker CEO, who actually seemed utterly clueless to me, because he was saying, oh yeah, we're not sure if computer's really that relevant, and we have an incredible tech team of our own, and that's our differentiator, and all this other stuff. And I was like, dude, you are so dead.
I completely agree. I completely agree with you in the premise of this form factor is something that we've been interacting with and wearing. But if you'll indulge me for 1 minute, Steve Jobs told a story about being a kid I can't remember where I watched this interview. It was a long, long time ago. And he was about 12 years old. And there was some study published in the Scientific American. And it showed that when it came to efficiency and speed, humans came in like third and condors came in first. But then you put the human on the bicycle and the human far outruns the condor, right? And he took this idea of the bicycle and the fact that humans can fashion tools to make ourselves more efficient and use this as really this kind of foundational idea, this bicycle for the mind. The computer and technology is the bicycle for the mind. And it's something that I think about so much here in this conversation of AI, because AI is the next frontier of the bicycle for the mind, making ourselves more efficient and more effective so that we can go and enjoy life in other ways and not be stuck doing menial tasks and not looking for our keys or our glasses or whatever it might be in that particular moment. There's probably not one answer, is the truth. Some people probably will be very happy and excited to wear glasses that otherwise look pretty regular, like you said. The Ray-Bans are a great example, but they also haven't really been that far and wide adopted. And I think we can look at human history, and this is such a wonderful industrial design question, whether it's an amulet, jewelry, whether it's a headpiece, whether it's a hat, whether it's, there's probably going to be an entire range. And I think that that's just going to be a really exciting and fun space to explore. There's probably not one answer for everyone. Everyone probably wants to enjoy. And Sam Altman spoke about this in the All In podcast. He just said these models are all going to be pretty smart and pretty equal when it comes to intelligence. So really, it's about creating product and experience that people want to stay in and want to use that is not a burden or a friction in their day-to-day life.
I think as you were speaking, kind of a penny dropped for me here. First of all, I would disagree with the concept that people will not strap a computer to their face or that there will be privacy concerns, because history has borne out neither is true. And again, look at these things. These are computers. They have advanced processors in them. And
Yaniv is pointing to his AirPods for people on the audio only.
My wife is a high school teacher, and she has a lot of trouble because it turns out that a lot of younger folks now, not only do they like to listen to their AirPods, they are so attached to them that they won't remove them even when they're not listening to anything. It's actually, they feel naked without their AirPods in their ears. Kind of disturbing for us oldies, but that's where it's going. And so, yeah, I think we will have computers. Now, I think, Elli, when you're talking about amulets and tiaras and goodness knows what, I don't think there will be just a single form factor, to your point. And it's maybe nearly even worth separating out what the value is of the wearables, right? I actually think one of the big things is a sensor bundle. The idea that you have sensors that observe what's going on around you and capture that, which can then be processed and used to help you to be that bicycle for your mind. I think a camera is an important one. And again, I will put the privacy concerns to one side because, frankly, recent history has shown that people say one thing and do another thing, revealed preferences. Everyone's going to have a camera strapped to them at all times. And, one of the advantages of glasses is the camera is pointed in the direction that you're looking. But there are other ways to do that. A tiara could work well, like you said. A pendant or an amulet.
I would love to see you in a tiara, Yaniv. I think that you would look very pretty.
Fantastic in a tiara.
I'm picturing a world in which everyone's just walking around with these tiaras. This is like a totally, I'm not even going to call this dystopian. I'm going to call this utopian fun, super fun.
And we'll stop saying hello to each other. We'll just go, yes, queen. And that'll just be the way we greet you.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a Disney princess, that's for sure. And if you think, again, like you were talking about your Oura rings and your Apple Watches, like Oura ring is a pure sensor bundle. Again, it has no interface, right? An Apple Watch is a combination of a sensor bundle and an interface. But I think the point here is they're already starting to be decoupled. They will be increasingly decoupled. You will want to make sure that you have a microphone and a GPS and a camera and so on you at all times. And then there will be modalities to interact with it. Your AirPods might be one modality. Your phone might be another modality. If you have smart glasses with a heads-up display, that might be another modality, but you don't need it. But what you will have is a camera. That's my prediction, is in 5 years, everyone's going to have a camera that is front-facing and more or less sees what you see.
And as you said, how you're interacting with that data then is the interesting question. And Sam Altman said in the conversation with the All In podcast guys, he said, the phone is a really hard product to beat because it is so versatile. And the fact is that it probably is, at least for quite a while, going to be still the main interface that you're interacting with that data. But I also think that everyone gave the human AI pin such a hard role, and we don't need to dive into that, but at least they're experimenting with different ways to interact with that data, whether it is a projector hologram, whether it is voice, at least they're exploring and testing. And that's the point.
I actually believe, and Ellie, as an industrial designer, you might be horrified, but I think someone will solve the industrial design problem of putting front-facing cameras on earbuds. In the same way, like, it might not be the ideal form factor, but it's the form factor we have. And like I said, the kids, and not just the kids, but especially the kids, are already plugged into these things all the time. And in the same way that the web is built on JavaScript, which is insane, like there's a sort of path dependency. I think when you talk about wearables that are on our heads and ubiquitous, we already have one. And my feeling is that earbuds are actually going to be the predominant form factor. So that's my more concrete prediction, that in 5 years, we will have front-facing cameras and potentially other things, heart rate monitors, things like that, in our earbuds.
The phone is not going away, probably not in our lifetimes. That glowing brick, as you described it, which I thought was such a beautiful description, the addictive glowing brick, a piece of glass that you slip into your pocket, pull out, and can interact with in a way that is full attention, somewhat productive, large enough to read and touch and interact with, that is not going away in our lifetime. What we're really talking about is what is the form factor for the heads-up sensor bundle, to use the vocabulary we've developed on today's show. Is it a pin? Is it earbuds, headphones, whatever? I'm bullish personally that the glasses take up a meaningful percentage of adoption for that heads-up sensor bundle. But the conclusion must be, this is a multi-device, multi-form factor, multi-modality world. I'm so excited about it. Before we wrap up on this topic, you mentioned the word, Ellie, emotional. You were emotional watching it. I think it is worth lingering on that because, we tend to analyze this so much from like business and, economics and trends. I was also emotional. I was emotional at the fake Google demo that turned out to be bullshit. And I was emotional at this.
That must have been a letdown for you.
It was a real emotional letdown. But, I was excited. I was shocked at how flirty and personable it was, that we had gotten there so fast. And I'm just frankly anxious. I'm anxious about my job. I don't even know what the point of this content production thing is, right? Like when you can ask Gemini, which one of the announcements was that you can turn it into experts and ask it for expert advice, right? Well, what's the point of expertise in general, right? What is the point of any of this? We have to acknowledge, I think, and it's not popular to acknowledge this. This is anxiety. We should be anxious. People are anxious. They're bewildered. They're dazed at a very emotional time, and things are changing rapidly. And I think it's worth acknowledging that as people on a podcast to empathize with people who are listening to this going, what the hell is going on? And I think that's worth mentioning.
I'm dead on the inside, so I have no emotions, but that's okay. The two of you can fill that role.
I think I was emotional because, for better or worse, I'm such an optimist about this stuff. I believe that this is going to release us from a tech prison, so to speak. I think that if we feel addicted to, and yes, I call it the glowy brick. We call it the glowy brick in our household because it's any moment you turn around, you're like, where's my glowy brick? It's well documented and discussed that people want to get away from their screens. Every wellness, health tech startup is about less screen time and more real time and peeling ourselves away from the screens. But we also, in the same breath, recognize that these things make us so much more efficient, more creative, more collaborative, able to record a podcast with us all over the world in one place at one time. And I think that I got emotional because, to me, this does represent a paradigm shift that may release us from some of that screen time and allow us to be more present in our day-to-day lives because of the expansion of how we can continue to interact with this tech. Because this tech is obviously deeply important to the way that we live, work, play, function, and it's not going away. And so the most important question we can ask is, how do we make it more suited to us as humans? And I keep bringing it back to this conversation that Sam Altman had on the All In podcast, because I thought he gave us so many interesting nuggets of the way that he's thinking about the future with AI. And he still believes, and I agree, and I feel this way too, that the world is designed for humans and it should continue to be designed for humans. And AI and how we interact with it should be multimodal between human and AI interaction. And we should be able to switch between the two. For me, it was an emotional response because I think when I look at that, I see that this is going to be a shift in the way that we're currently interacting with technology into a space that potentially is more human and less screen bound. And I immediately sent the video to every important person in my life and said, you need to watch this because this is going to change the way that we interact with our technology and the way we work, live, and play. And I'm so excited for that.
Okay, so a quick one we wanted to talk about is Apple just had their new iPad event last week. They released a couple of new iPads. That wasn't very interesting, but then they released an ad and the internet went wild. And this ad basically showed this beautiful set of musical instruments, painting instruments, record players, all of this gorgeous stuff. And then they were put between a vice and just crushed violently and slowly. And then the reveal was, after they were all crushed down to nothing, the iPad was revealed. iPad Pro, I believe it was. And so the implication, of course, is that all of these amazing things, all of these amazing capabilities fit into this one tiny device. But the internet took it differently. There was a massively negative reaction. What do we think caused that?
Look, the narrative of the reaction is, artists are at risk of losing their jobs and AI is coming after artistic expression and Apple is historically on the side of artists and they're showing all of this stuff being carelessly crushed down by technology and it was kind of thoughtless and careless and tone deaf and all this kind of stuff. I think this says two things. On the legitimate side, I think there's a real anxiety, as we talked about these emotions. There's a real anxiety around AI and around technology coming for everybody's jobs. And everyone thought artists would be immune or protected from this, and they'd be the last to be disrupted by technology. And I think that's a legitimate concern, and artists are a little bit anxious about that. On the other hand, though, I think there's a frivolous or ridiculous part of this, which is that, the more extreme right-wing commentators call this the woke mind virus, victim mentality. I think there's more sensitive ways of describing this, but I do think that there is this culture now, or this kind of profiteering and outrage and exaggeration. And I do think people are excessively sensitive. They can't take a joke. They can't take things for how they're intended. They can't read between the lines. They can't handle a little bit of controversy or offense. Or worse than all of that, they can take it, but they pretend like they can't. And they're just like creating false controversy and nonsense. And I think it's all.
And now we're contributing to it.
I think it's really, frankly, a little bit of noise.
I think this was just massive groupthink. I think that, this is an example of, yes, absolutely, people having an outsized reaction to something. Having said that, it's because it struck a nerve. It poked a sore spot or a wound. People are having some kind of emotional knee-jerk reaction fueled by loss aversion and nostalgia. And so nobody is taking your trumpets or your metronomes, but the people, ironically, the people who lament those items have probably never owned or used one. And it all feels a little bit performative to me in terms of this general massive groupthink and outrage. My hot take on this is that it was a hugely successful ad. Absolutely no one would be talking about the iPad launch, that they just made this product thinner. And here is everyone talking about the iPad launch. And if that's what advertising is meant to do, this was a massively successful ad. Great creative is controversial. People hated a lot of the early Apple, dancing or the I'm a Mac, I'm a PC ads. Those ones were maybe not as controversial in their time. But when a piece of advertising or a piece of creative is controversial and it provokes a response, it is hugely successful. I think that maybe the only miss was that they probably, if you play the ad backwards where it's expanding, it tells the same story. And I didn't come up with that. I read that on X, on Twitter. Someone, I can't remember who it was, put that idea out there, and it's accurate. It tells the same story, what they were trying to convey, but in a less controversial way. And would that have received the same press, or would we be talking about it in this episode? Absolutely not. So Ben Thompson, the author of Stratechery, wrote, one thing he credits Apple for is not trying to erase the ad from the internet. It's still posted on CEO Tim Cook's X account because it's important, not just as a marker of what's happened over the last few years, but also the choices facing us in the years ahead. And that's a more serious take on it. And sure, I buy that. I also just think it was massively performative.
The other take I saw on this that, in a sense similar, is like Steve Jobs would never have allowed this. Right? Like it goes against Steve Jobs' aesthetic. And it's like, well, you mentioned nostalgia. There's this element of Steve Jobs nostalgia that is kind of annoying as well, which is like, he was a great man and he is sadly no longer with us. It is not Steve Jobs' Apple anymore, and that is how it should be, right? What would be worse is an Apple that was stuck in time trying to second guess itself, thinking, what would Steve do? Because that is not how you build a successful company, right? So yes, maybe Steve Jobs wouldn't have liked this ad. Maybe he never would have approved it. Who cares?
I think he would have. I think he would have loved it. People saying Steve Jobs would have never done this is such a cop-out. They're right. Steve Jobs would have never just kept releasing the same thing, but thinner. That's the difference. Steve Jobs would have said, okay, we've done it with this iPad thing. Let's think about what's the next, talk about form factors. What's the next form factor? What's the next paradigm shift?
Okay, even shorter, hotter takes. So Microsoft and OpenAI launched a $2 million fund to combat election deepfakes. $2 million, I can't remember who said it. It's like, I don't even know how to count that low. Two of the most valuable companies in the world putting $2 million towards election deepfakes. It's like leaving a 1% tip. It's like actually broadcasting that you're not going to take this thing seriously.
The keyword here is the same keyword as the last hot take, which is performative.
But what a terrible performance.
Yeah, terrible.
That, if this whole performative thing around Apple, to Elli, your point, was really successful because it got people talking about the iPad, what this has got people talking about is the fact that Microsoft and OpenAI are not taking election fraud seriously at all. So why spend even $2 million on that performative thing that's just going to backfire and make it say, well, you obviously don't give a shit about this?
It's such a farce. As Kara Swisher put it, they spend more on kombucha in the offices in 1 week than the $2 million that they've put toward this. I also like the way that Scott Galloway put it on a more serious note. The AI question of deepfakes in election is creating a weapon of mass distraction. And I think that's the real thing to focus on, is the question of how it might be used and the fact that they've allocated $2 million. I heard some optimist out there, and I don't know how much they got paid to say this, that maybe that's all it takes to apply a digital signature to AI generated work.
Yeah, look, the reality is they're probably spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on R&D around signatures or deepfakes and detection and, countermeasures and whatever. This was kind of, I don't know, some marketing, non-profit budget that was like, hey, yeah, let's put a few bucks into this, and that ended up backfiring.
Just don't announce it. Do it, but don't announce it.
But as we talked about many times before in this show, these companies are not monoliths. They're made up of individuals making individual choices. And what I'd like to do on the show actually is really go deeper and try to figure out who the individuals behind these decisions and products are, and talk more about them, more like the movie shows that talk about the directors and DPs and editors and sound designers. I really think that these people deserve more limelight, and these companies talking about them as monoliths is actually somewhat of a mistake. And so I think we need to go a little deeper and understand the individual personalities behind it.
Yeah, that's actually very true. When I was at Google, I used to listen to these shows and they were like, Google thinks this and Google thinks that. And I'm like,
yes,
Google has no fucking clue what it thinks, because everyone on the inside disagrees and has different opinions on this. So the idea that there is some perfect hive mind directing these things is simply factually inaccurate. And I agree with that point.
Mistakes get made. And frankly, you're probably right, Chris, is that they probably are contributing meaningful budgets to this type of work already. They just should have allocated it in the press release when they put this through. They should have said, we're allocating this $2 million fund, and also we're already doing all of this other work. Here it is. And probably that was just a mistake internally that was made.
All right, guys, this is a fun conversation as always. Elli, how can people find you on the internet if they want to follow up with you?
The best place to find me is probably on LinkedIn, Elli Hanson, ELLIHANSON, like the Hanson brothers.
Any relation to the Hanson brothers?
Though we're both Canadian, sadly, no. I wish I could say otherwise.
That's disappointing. Soundtrack of my teenage years. Okay, yeah, so I am also mainly on LinkedIn, Yaniv Bernstein. Not many of us out there, so I'm nice and easy to find. I'm also on Twitter, officially known as X, @YBernstein. That's where I put my less palatable, spicier takes, so you can follow me there too. How about you, Chris?
Yes, I'm Chris Saad on all social media, or check me out at chrissaad.com and chrissaad.com/newsletter. All right, guys, we'll catch you all in the next one.
All right. Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
See you later. Bye-bye.
This episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by Vanta. Vanta helps businesses get and stay compliant by automating up to 90% of the work for the most in-demand compliance frameworks. With over 200 integrations, you can easily monitor and secure the tools your business relies on. Head to vanta.com/TSP for 20% off their incredible offering and start unlocking extra revenue today.